One pensioner wrote to me saying this: "The allowance meant I could turn the heating on. Now I fear hypothermia during the coming winter months."
Starmer is facing a real crisis, and the growing public anger, as well as internal divisions in the Labour Party, clearly indicate that his days in office may be numbered. The discontent covers not only ordinary citizens but also members of his own party, who openly oppose his decisions. His popularity is plummeting every day, and more people are starting to call him the worst Prime Minister in the world. His policies have caused a wave of outrage across the country, will generate deep discontent over rising taxes, controversial benefit cuts and disregard for the core values that were once the cornerstone of the party. Stay tuned to find out why Starmer's rating has collapsed so rapidly, and what consequences this may have for the future of the country.
Madam Deputy Speaker, like many MPs, I've been contacted by constituents, and that my honourable friend over there is clearly being contacted by constituents as we speak, desperate with worry about Labour's planned removal of the winter fuel payment from almost all pensioners.
Just last week on PM, Keir Starmer desperately tried to defend his government's policies, but his own words echoed in his mind with striking clarity. It was a moment of profound realization, and for Starmer, it served as a chilling wake-up call to the significant public support he had lost. The weight of his actions and their consequences bore down on him, leaving him with a sense of unease and uncertainty, lawlessness. His government, which had barely spent a few months in power, had already lost touch with the people it had sworn to serve. It promised to improve the lives of citizens, but in fact only worsened it. Let's start with the disastrous budget and economic plan, which has led to pensioners, families and working women having to struggle to survive, barely making ends meet. This is simply unacceptable. How can you be so callous to people who believed in the promises of the government and now suffer from its mistakes?
Until that maniac Starmer is no longer in number 10, we are in serious trouble. He's lied to everybody in his manifesto. He acted disproportionately during the civil unrest. He's now bringing in blasphemy laws, sending people to jail for essentially asking who their God is. I won't say it word for word because I could end up in jail.
Starmer launched a real war against the tax policies of the previous government, promising to improve the lives of the working class. But to our horror, his own tax policy turned out to be even more brutal, putting a huge burden on ordinary Britons. Taxes have skyrocketed, and this has hit middle and low-income families especially hard. No one could have imagined that the first 100 days of Labour's rule would be such chaos. I expected them to be bad, but not that bad. These measures, which were supposed to be a salvation for working men and women, actually only aggravated their suffering. The irony is that the one who so fiercely criticized the tax increase is now behind the largest tax increase in recent years. For millions of people, this financial pressure has become a real disaster. Working families feel cornered by the sharp rise in the cost of living and cannot cope with the rising costs. They must protect the most vulnerable pensioners and at the same time restore public finances. After all, pensioners depend on the functioning of the national health system, public transport and reliable infrastructure. They want their children to be able to afford housing and their grandchildren to receive a high-quality education. Meanwhile, pensioners, already suffering from high heating costs and vital things, can only wonder how they will survive the coming winter. With rising inflation, public discontent grows into a storm of indignation when more and more people realize that they are simply doomed to oblivion due to cruel tax policies. And it's not just taxes.
Well, during the election campaign, Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves said that nothing in their plans required tax increases that went over and above what was in their manifesto that was quite limited. And from all of the pre-briefing we've seen, it now looks very likely, near certain, there are going to be enormous tax increases coming, despite the fact they told the public in the election campaign that wouldn't happen. So I think they lied to the British public, they misled the British public in order to get elected, and now we're seeing their true colours, now we're seeing what their plans really are.
Labour voters are waking up to the reality of Sir Keir Starmer and co, saying one thing before the election and doing something completely different now they're in power.
I'm a staunch Labour voter, and I was ashamed to see a Labour government hit the poorest people the most.
The winter fuel allowance is not just a financial aid, it is a lifeline for the elderly, which has been helping them survive the harsh British winters without freezing since 1997. But to our great disappointment, the Starmer administration announced, without any warning, a drastic reduction in this vital support. Now more than 10 million retirees, many of whom depend on this benefit to keep their homes warm, will be denied this assistance if they do not meet the strict conditions associated with the pension loan. This decision condemns many people to a vulnerable position, leaving them without the necessary support in the cold season. How can you act so callously with those who are already facing difficulties? These pensioners deserve care and attention, not indifference and cruelty.
And those who are planning their retirement deserve better than his contempt for their questions. Because if £46 billion were cut from its funding, the value of the state pension would almost halve. So I don't apologise for asking on their behalf again whether he will finally rule out cutting their state pension to fulfil the enormous black hole in his spending plans.
That's why the Labour Party has a fully costed plan to freeze energy bills this winter. And we'll pay for that with a windfall tax on those unexpected profits. I understand, I completely understand, why so many people are frustrated at the government.
Elderly people who have worked honestly and paid taxes all their lives now feel betrayed and abandoned to their fate. This deep disappointment and bitterness are reflected in their eyes when they realize that their efforts and sacrifices have been forgotten. Human rights organizations and political critics unanimously condemn this policy, calling it a heartless step that cruelly ignores the real lives of older people, leaving them in distress. For Labour, a party that once prided itself on its dedication to caring for the vulnerable, this looks like a slap in the face to those who have built the foundation of Britain over the years and deserve respect and support. But it doesn't end there. The Starmer government also shocked the country by doubling the allowance for 2 children, a measure that was introduced by the Conservatives in 2017. This decision causes anger and bewilderment among many Labour supporters, who remember how the party vehemently opposed this policy, calling it a cruel measure punishing families with more than 2 children. Labour was supposed to be a party that sincerely fights for the well-being of families and opposes child poverty, but now they seem to be traitors to their own ideals. How could this happen? How can those who need support the most be left in the lurch?
He is already extremely unpopular. He is going to become more unpopular. We've got October the 30th coming up. I can't think of what shocking shape Labour are going to be in. And the truth about the matter is that they got in because...
With each new suspension, Keir Starmer risks not only losing the support of his deputies, but also alienating loyal voters. Supporters who have remained loyal to the party for decades are beginning to feel that the values that Labour once defended are now being destroyed under the yoke of an authoritarian and rigid leadership style that does not tolerate any criticism. What kind of future awaits Starmer? His precipitous drop in approval ratings, rising taxes and mounting discontent among key constituencies put him in an extremely vulnerable position. The growing disillusionment of the electorate causes a sense of betrayal. Many believe that Starmer has departed from the principles that once united the party and its supporters, and this feeling deeply hurts. Starmer's ability to reconnect with voters will be a decisive factor in his political fate. The public craves a leader who not only speaks, but really understands their problems and can offer real solutions to everyday difficulties. The gap between Starmer's rhetoric and the real lives of ordinary Britons continues to widen, and if he does not take decisive steps to overcome it, he risks losing the very essence of the Labour Party, the party that should represent the interests of the working class and families. The longer Starmer sticks to his hardline approach and ignores reasonable criticism, the more likely it is that a rebellion will start within his party. This could lead to a change of leadership or even an internal split, further undermining public confidence. Amid a sharp drop in ratings, skyrocketing taxes and widespread discontent with his recent decisions, his leadership finds itself in one of the darkest periods in the history of the party. Time is running out, and the future of the Labour Party hangs in the balance. What do you think about this video? Share your thoughts in the comments. See you later.